A wild Mustang. Broken. Bleeding. Half submerged in freezing flood mud. It lies silent, beneath the ruins of a shattered dam. Its ribs cut the air. Its breath fades. And above it, a slab of concrete leans. Motionless. Waiting to fall. No screams. No struggle. Just surrender. And the only man within miles? A war medic. Who once held his dying son and said nothing. Now, 9 years later, he climbs down into the dark. Not to save a horse, but to face the one moment that broke him. The concrete groans above. The mud claws his legs. And the only rope between them is rusted wire tied to his own bleeding wrist. This isn't mercy. It's madness. But sometimes, the most human thing we can do is refuse to walk away. What he pulls from the pit may not be a horse, and he may not come back a man. This is Gallop of Glory. And the story begins, not with a scream, but with a silence so deep, even the water forgot how to move. There are places where the water no longer flows. And there are people just like that. On the far edge of the Wyoming high plains, where maps turn to ash, and the wind blows without a name. A rotting cabin clung to the hillside, like an old apology to the earth. Weathered, leaning, and with no reason left to stand. No electricity. No signal. No one knew anyone still lived there. Raymond Webb. Once a combat medic in the Marines. He had held his best friend's hand until the fingers broke off from the cold. He had severed a child's arm, still alive, to save the rest of him from a landmine set on delay. He had survived 3 evacuations. And once, he held his own son, dead from friendly fire, killed by his own unit. He didn't walk away. He vanished. This broken house, it was the last place, still willing to accept his silence. The only place where memory no longer had a face. Just a roof torn wide. A handful of rusted nails. And a hammer. The last weapon he still knew how to use. No one had said his name in 9 years. No one asked. No one remembered. And then, a sound tore through the air. Short. Sharp. Cold, like a blade through skin. Not human. Not animal. It screamed. And vanished. As if it knew it wasn't supposed to exist. Raymond froze. One hand still on the hammer. One foot pressed against a damp shingle. His heart missed a beat. Not from fear. Not from curiosity. But because, for the first time in years, he felt something that hurt more than memory. It should have looked like an animal. But it didn't. It looked like something pulled out of the earth too early. Like grief given a body. The Mustang's skin clung to its ribs. Not from hunger, but from the weight of still being alive. Its body had folded in on itself. Not violently, but deliberately. The way a soldier curls around a wound he knows he can't treat. The hip was dislocated. The back leg twisted in a direction that betrayed biology. Its breath came in pulses. Not steady, but obedient. As if it didn't want to disturb the silence. Raymond stood frozen at the edge. His fingers dug into the dirt. But his mind was already somewhere else. It was the eyes. God, it was the eyes. Wide. Still. Not glossy with panic like most prey. Just watching. Not the way a horse looks at a man, but the way a dying man looks at the sky when he knows God isn't coming. It wasn't asking him to help. It wasn't asking anything. It was waiting. The same way his son had waited. Lying in Raymond's lap. Half a lung left. Blood spilling out in tiny waves against the concrete floor. Eyes locked on his father's face. Not screaming. Not begging. Just waiting. And Raymond. He remembered what he said that day. He remembered lying. It's okay. You can let go. It's not your fault. But the truth was, he'd wanted to scream. Wanted to shake him. To shout, "Don't you dare die on me." Because the second that boy let go, so did Raymond. He never forgave himself. Not for the death, but for letting it happen quietly. And now, this creature, this horse, this thing that didn't speak, didn't cry, didn't plead, was offering him the same moment, the same silence, the same goddamn mercy he didn't deserve. Raymond blinked, and tears cut across dust that hadn't felt water in years. The wind didn't howl, but inside his chest, something screamed. He took a step forward, then another, boots sinking into soaked earth. He didn't know what he was going to do. Didn't know if the horse would bite, bolt, or bleed out. Didn't know if he'd fall trying to get down the ravine. Didn't care. Because for the first time in 9 years, he couldn't walk away. "I left once," he whispered to no one. Never again. He had sworn off this part of himself. The part that ran into danger. That reached out when it already hurt too much. That looked at something broken and believed it could be saved. That part got men killed. Thomas. Raymond didn't have to close his eyes to see it. It was etched behind his eyelids. Burned into the inside of his skull. The overturned Humvee. The sand churning with black smoke. And Thomas. Crushed from the waist down. Pinned. Still alive. Raymond had hesitated. Just one moment. Just one breath of disbelief. And in that single, godless pause, Thomas bled out. Not fast. Not easy. Quietly. He had looked up. Just like this horse was looking now. Wide-eyed. Already knowing. After that day, Raymond stopped wearing his uniform. Stopped returning calls. Stopped answering his name. He didn't bury the past. He built a house for it. Nailed it shut. Boarded the windows. Let the silence come live with him. And it did. 9 years of silence. 9 years of pretending that not saving anyone was a kind of safety. But this wasn't safety. This was a choice. Not demanded. Not deserved. Offered. Like a wound. Reopening. Just to let the poison out. His boots sank deep. Into mud that gripped like regret. With every step, the past screamed louder. It's too late again. You're too slow again. You'll fail again. The water reached his thighs. Each movement pulled cold into his spine. Like glass. He slipped once. Knee slammed into stone beneath the surface. It tore his jeans. Didn't matter. Pain was part of the toll. He found the wire. Old fencing, wrapped in algae and rust. It cut his hand the moment he touched it. Still, he wound it tight. Looped it around his wrist. Not the horse's. His. If he was going down, there would be no confusion. He reached the Mustang. And up close? It was worse. The gash on its side wasn't bleeding anymore. That meant shock had taken over. Its breath came shallow. Its muscles trembled. In waves that didn't reach the hooves. The eyes. Those same, brutal eyes. They didn't blink anymore. Just stared. Not at him. Through him. Like it was seeing the man he should have been. His fingers reached forward. Paused. If I touch it, I can't go back. I'll care again. Caring meant risking. Risking meant losing. Losing meant... Raymond's voice cracked. Before he even spoke. I'm not ready to lose anything else. The horse didn't move. Didn't flinch. Didn't answer. It didn't need to. Raymond exhaled. Closed his eyes. Then placed both hands on the animal. Not like a rescuer. Not like a soldier. Like a father. Finally touching the grave he never visited. His hands sank into the wet mane. Wire bit into his palm. The cold bit into his spine. But in that moment, he was alive. More alive than he'd been in years. He whispered, "You waited. So I came." And he started. One breath. One knot. One act of madness. To undo 9 years of silence. The water rose. Not in waves. But in will. Slow. Soundless. Cold. As if it knew that every inch it gained was draining a piece of his life. Behind the horse, a massive slab of concrete, broken off from the old dam, leaned over the edge of the mud pit. Like a blade ready to drop. It didn't shake. Didn't slide. Just stood there. Waiting. For the slightest misstep. And then, it would end everything. Raymond looked up at it once. Then looked down. No prayers. No pleading. Just action. He drove the crowbar into the softened ground. Took the rusted wire. Bent it into a makeshift pulley. Fragile. But it was all he had. Every tug of the wire. Every twist around the horse's belly. Felt like stitching raw skin. Onto a wound that wouldn't stop bleeding. His own skin. He looked at the horse. Its body convulsed. The water had reached its shoulders. The hip was split. The wound gaping. As if death was already chewing the edges. But its eyes stayed open. No panic. No whimper. Only trust. Raymond began to pull. One step. Then another. The horse's body slid through the mud. Letting out a sound. Like flesh tearing from bone. It groaned. But didn't resist. The wire tightened. Like a nerve pulled to the edge of snapping. The crowbar bent. Paused. Held. Then, disaster. The mud beneath his boot collapsed. He slipped. Went down, hard. All his weight slammed. Onto his right wrist. The wrist tied to the wire. The tightening sound was sharp. Like a whip crack. He was yanked forward. Dragged into the thick black current. Cold enough to make every cell scream in revolt. His face slammed into rock. Eyes filled with silt. Ears heard only Rope hissing. And water howling. The wrist burned. Didn't snap. Didn't break free. Just screamed. So sharp. His whole body curled. Like a corpse caught in live wire. He flailed. No surface. No direction. Only a chest. Ready to explode. From the lack of air. Dying for a rope. For a horse. For a memory. That refused to die. Then. A kick. A hoof. Hard. Square into the chest. Bones cracked. Not 1. 3. He didn't scream. There was no breath left. Only blood. Rising in his throat. Hot. Foreign. And familiar. The pain triggered instinct. His legs kicked. His hand yanked. His chest hissed. Like it was being torched from the inside. A hidden surge lifted beneath him. And he broke the surface. He roared. Coughed. Breathed. Like someone who'd had their throat cut. And was just given 1 second of mercy. And the horse stood still. It didn't flee. Didn't rear. Didn't thrash. Its legs were still submerged. But its head rose. It looked at him. For the first time. Truly looked. And in that gaze. No plea. No thanks. Only recognition. I see you now. I really do. And I know. You're not going to leave me again. Raymond coughed blood again. His ribs felt like blades, slicing every breath in half. But the rope stayed taut. His hand stayed clenched. He lowered his voice. Just enough for 2 beings to hear. You've stopped. Now it's my turn. And he pulled. The whole world narrowed down to this. 1 being dying. 1 man dying with him. And a single rope. Binding them both. To something no one believed in anymore. A second chance. No more water. No more mud. No more sound of rope tightening around bone. Only a blank space. Still. Empty. Cold. Not like death. But like an invitation. Have you gone far enough to turn back yet? Then a memory surged up. Uninvited. Unapologetic. Not the war. Not Thomas. Not the nightmare of blood and fire. But Scout. The name surfaced like a wet thread. Pulled straight from the heart. After 9 years of ice. Scout. His first horse. And the only one he ever believed would never leave him. He saw himself. 16. Barefoot. Sunburnt cheeks. A chest untouched by bullets. A laugh that hadn't yet learned to hide. Golden fields. Grass tall enough to whisper back. A sky without aircraft. Wind with no scent of gunpowder. Just him. And Scout. No saddle. No reins. No commands. Only freedom. The kind he would one day realize wasn't given. It was something he once held. Without knowing. Scout wasn't a good horse. His back left leg, crooked. 1 ear, torn. Always walked out of line. But he was the only one who knew when to stop. When to run. And when to simply stand still. So a boy could press his forehead into a warm neck and cry. The last time he rode him, there was no goodbye, no accident, just this. He grew up. Scout grew old. He never said farewell, and he never forgave himself for that. Underwater, his heart beat again, but not out of fear, not survival, because the ache of memory had hit bottom. I'm not mourning a life I lost. I'm mourning the part of me that used to be human. Blood rose in his throat. Chest torn. Hand still clenching the rope. Eyes blurred with water. But then, a voice. Not the medic. Not the father. Not the one who survived. But the boy. The one who once stretched his arms on a horse's back and truly believed. The sun rose. Because he hadn't yet fallen. He opened his eyes. The water still pressed in. The pain still remained. But ahead, rising slowly, was dry ground. The edge. The shore. The horse had turned around. Didn't run. Didn't leave. It stood. Still. Waiting. Its gaze. No longer the stare of a wounded animal, but the look of Scout. Raymond laughed. Laughed as if tearing bone from his own lung. So sharp, it shredded his throat. But for the first time, in 9 long years, he heard it. The sound of himself, alive. You want me to lead? Like before? He braced. Pushed. Pulled. Not out of duty. Not out of kindness. But because. If this horse wasn't giving up, then maybe the part of him that was still human hadn't given up either. He didn't swim. Didn't crawl. Didn't move like someone still alive. Raymond dragged himself toward the shore. Like a body pulled from the earth, for the second time. His knees hit the mud. His cheek sank into the cold ground. Blood. Water. Darkness. Soaked through every inch of him. But his right hand still gripped the rope. The rusted wire, twisted tight around his wrist, was no longer just a rope. It was a verdict. Not slipping. Not breaking. Just cutting deeper every second. His body had stopped listening. Lungs burned. Each breath. A scream beneath the ribs. But still, he pulled. Not because he thought he'd save the horse. Not because the horse mattered more than he did. But because, if he let go now, then those 9 silent years would mean nothing. The water kept falling. The mud held tight, like claws in the earth. Raymond leaned in, gave everything to the rope. Each pull tore skin. Each step bled pain. But pain was proof he was still here. He had lived 9 years. As a man who moved. But wasn't alive. Just ash in the shape of someone who used to be. And now, below him, something was dying. Behind him, the land that never forgave. And at his wrist, the only choice left. One more pull. His body twisted. Breath snapped in half. The joint in his wrist screamed. If I die, he thought. Let it be while holding on. Not drifting like a shadow without a soul. It didn't rise. It didn't push. Didn't fight. Didn't move like an animal trying to survive. It just allowed itself to be pulled. Raymond's hands blistered. His wrist throbbed like it was trying to detach from bone. But inch by inch, the weight behind him shifted. The Mustang's body dragged through the mud with a sound so raw, it didn't belong to this world. A wet tearing, like muscle peeling from memory. The legs didn't brace. The neck didn't lift. But the creature didn't resist. And that was everything. Because sometimes, choosing not to run is a louder answer than any scream. Raymond didn't look back. He couldn't. If he saw how broken it was, he might break, too. So he pulled. Teeth clenched. Vision blurred. His feet sank into muck that tried to claim him. But he moved forward, like a man dragging a promise he made to someone already gone. Behind him, the Mustang slid through blood, through silt, through water so cold it had turned muscle into stone. But it followed. Not by will. Not by instinct. By surrender. And in that surrender, there was something sacred. It didn't ask to be saved. Didn't demand mercy. It simply gave itself to the only thing that hadn't let go. Raymond. And the rusted line between them. At the edge of land, the horse's breath hitched. Its side caved inward. Its flank quivered once, then stilled. Still no sound. Still no plea. But its eyes stayed open, watching him. Not with fear. Not with pain. But with something colder. Older. A kind of ancient, voiceless pact. If you're not letting go, I won't either. They didn't arrive. They didn't triumph. They just collapsed. Raymond hit the dry patch first. Face down. Arms sprawled. The rope still wrapped tight around his wrist. His body shaking in spasms too deep to control. Behind him, the Mustang's chest hit earth with a dull, wet thud. No whinny. No cry. Only the sound of a body, too heavy with survival to fall gracefully. They lay there, breathing, if it could be called that. Gasps. Gurgles. Shudders. The kind of breath that comes after something ancient inside you is broken loose. No one moved. The wind passed over them. Gentle now. Less like weather. More like a question. Is this what it takes? Raymond didn't answer. Couldn't. Not with lungs full of pain. Not with ribs cracked like kindling. But mostly because there was nothing left to say. And yet, everything had just been said. No medal. No applause. No banner screaming rescue. Just one man. One horse. And the ragged silence that lives in the space between death and what comes after. He didn't look at it. Didn't reach. Didn't speak. But something shifted in him. Something old. Something buried 9 years deep. He didn't need to call it back. Because it was already there. Lying beside him. Alive. It didn't start with sound. It started with stillness. The kind of stillness that only happens when something sacred has just barely survived. Raymond didn't hear the wind at first. He felt it, threading through the wet fibers of his torn clothes, sliding over skin split open by rope and regret, touching his chest, the way a father might check for breath after the screaming has stopped. Then, a breeze. Faint. Unhurried. It moved across the mud. over the blood-soaked hoofprints, through the broken reeds that had watched it all unfold. It slipped past the dying Mustang's flank, stirred its soaked mane, but didn't demand a shiver in return. And finally, it crossed Raymond's face, brushed the edge of his jaw, dried a streak of blood beside one eye, and stayed, just long enough to whisper a single, silent question. "Why are you still here?" Not cruel, not condemning, just curious. As if the land itself, after watching so many things die without protest, was now stunned to find two that didn't. Raymond didn't answer. Not aloud. But something in his silence said enough. A rasped breath. A twitch of fingers still holding the rope. A single blink, slow, deliberate. As if to say, "Because I finally didn't let go." The wind lingered. Not to test them. Not to bless them. But to mark them. Not as heroes. Not as victims. But as two beings who had once been forgotten. And now were simply undeniable. Above them, the sky held its breath. The earth quieted. Even the broken concrete slab behind them no longer threatened to fall. It was as if the world had seen enough suffering, and for now, chose to let these two keep breathing. Raymond didn't reach out. Not right away. He didn't rush. Didn't lunge. He just lay there, watching. Not watching the horse, but watching himself. In a body torn open, gasping, collapsed before a creature that no longer knew whether it had survived. Because this moment wasn't about saving, wasn't about doing the right thing. It was, for the first time in his life, a moment where he didn't have to be anyone. Not a soldier. Not a father. Not a survivor. Just a man. Finally stepping out of the dark. He raised his hand. Not steady. Not trembling. Just honest. His entire life, he had never touched anything without consequence. That hand had once held his best friend's shattered fingers, had once severed a child's arm to save what was left, had once turned over his own son's body, and no longer knew who to blame. That hand was where memory had been nailed into the skin. And now, he placed it on the horse's forehead, as if placing it on the part of himself he'd buried with his own hands 9 years ago. No one said anything. The wind had passed. The blood had dried. No more water pulling them under. Only eyes, wide open, but not afraid. The horse didn't tense, didn't lean in, just stood there, accepting the touch, the way a boy once let his father press a hand to his brow before stepping into a car that would never bring him home, accepting as if to say, "I don't know who you are, but I see you now. I know you've hurt, like I have." No longer man and horse. No longer rescuer and rescued. No longer strong and weak. Just two beings that had once gone silent and were now coming back. The horse's forehead, once split and bleeding from stone, now felt warm. Not because the blood had returned, but because this was the first time a human had touched it without needing to command it. There was no thank you. No "I'll take you home." No promise. But in Raymond's hand resting against the horse's head, was everything left of him. That war hadn't managed to steal. That touch didn't bring anyone back to life. It only proved one thing. I'm still human. If I can touch what's hurting without being afraid, it might pull me under with it. No one spoke, because there was nothing left to say. "No, you okay?" "No, we made it." The world, having just crossed the threshold between life and death, no longer needed language. All that remained was existence. Raw, wounded, undeniably real. Raymond didn't stroke, didn't soothe, didn't celebrate. He simply placed his hand on the horse's forehead. Not firm, not trembling, just present. As if to whisper to the universe, "I'm still here. And I know, so are you." It didn't bow in gratitude, didn't lean in for comfort. It just looked straight back. And in that stare was the flood, the shattered ribs, the wires screaming through flesh. Everything humans had done, and everything this one man chose to undo. That gaze said, "I don't belong to you, but I see you now. I see the part of you that once disappeared. And today, you brought it back. No spotlight, no wings crossing the sky, no miracle. Only two soaked forms. One hand resting on one brow. A man breathing as if each inhale carved through bone. And a creature exhaling gently, as if offering a piece of life back. The earth didn't cheer. The sky didn't open. But the world stayed still. And in that stillness was the final right. Not a welcome. Not forgiveness. Just this. They didn't run. They endured. And now they may remain. No one needed saving. No one called his name. No orders barked. And for the first time, he lived for himself. That touch didn't save the horse. It saved Raymond. I survived. Because I didn't let go of the part of me that was still human. Even when the world let go of it, long before I did. The sky didn't just darken. It gave out. Like a soul. Finally too tired to keep burning. The wind rose. Not in howls, but in long, cold exhales. Like something unseen was passing through the valley. One last time. Raymond didn't move. His feet were half buried in mud. His back trembled. Not from cold, but from something deeper. The kind of tremble that comes when you realize you don't know what comes next. Not anymore. Not after this. Behind him, the horse stirred. Slow. Painfully slow. Its front legs pushed up first. Shoulders twitching. Skin trembling like torn canvas. The hooves found no grip. And then, collapse. A dull, brutal thud. Its body hit the ground again. Mud flew, coating the reopened wound. Blood. Not fresh, but honest. Raymond closed his eyes. Not out of despair. Not even grief. But to feel the full weight of helplessness settle in his bones. Then, he moved forward. One more time. He picked up the frayed rope, wrapped it gently around the horse's chest. Didn't pull. Didn't lift. Didn't urge. Only held it there. As if to say, "You're not alone anymore." The horse opened its eyes again. Didn't flinch. Didn't react. Just looked. Straight into Raymond's eyes. As if asking, "If I try again, will you still be here?" Raymond didn't answer. Didn't need to. The rope rested in his hand. Not taut. Not slack. Then, the horse braced again. But not out of fear. Not out of instinct. This time, because of something shared. Its legs shook. Its body rose. Inch by inch. Like the ground itself was trying to keep it down. And yet, it stood. Swaying. But standing. A being that once chose to let go. Now stood. Because something in it believed. No one walks away anymore. Not even me. Raymond watched. Silent. Then gave a single nod. Turned. And walked. No words. No signal. Just the soft rhythm of mud being parted behind him. One step. Then another. Footsteps. Not his. The horse was following. No command. No reins. No whip. No saddle. Just one soul. Who had survived. Choosing to walk. Where the other had walked. Not out of obedience. Not out of fear. But because, for the first time in its life, it had seen someone who didn't walk away when it had nothing left to give. The cabin hadn't known light in 9 years. Not electric. Not even fire. But tonight, a faint oil lamp flickered behind its cracked window. Not bright. Just enough to whisper, "Someone is still here." Outside, under the sagging porch, the horse lay still, breathing slow. Not sleeping. Not tense. Just there. Its legs tucked beneath a battered frame. Eyes half closed. Facing the door. As if standing guard. Not against danger. But against silence coming back. Inside, Raymond sat at the old wooden table. His shirt, still damp. His ribs, wrapped in a torn strip of curtain. One hand held a yellowed envelope. The other, still bleeding, into a towel draped across his knee. On the table, a photograph. Worn. Faded. Corners bent with time. A teenage boy, barefoot, smiling wide. Sitting tall on a crooked-legged horse. With one torn ear. Scout. And a version of Raymond, who still believed in sunrises. He didn't smile at the memory. Didn't cry. Just read the letter again. One he'd read 100 times. Written by his son. 6 days before the deployment that killed him. "You don't have to come save me, Dad. Just be somewhere I can find. If I make it back." Raymond folded the letter. Slowly. Like the paper might split under the weight of memory. He set it beside the photo. Both now resting next to the lamp. Two things that no longer needed words. And then, he exhaled. A real breath. Not one to survive. But one that made space. To stay. Outside, the horse stirred. Its ear flicked. Toward the door. Raymond didn't move. Didn't speak. He looked at the blood crusting on his palm. Then whispered. Not to the horse. Not to the past. But to the silence itself. Some wounds don't close. But sometimes, someone shows up. And waits beside them anyway. Sometimes, the most powerful thing isn't winning, but the strength to stand up once more when everything seems to be falling apart. Wounds are more than just marks of defeat, they are a testament to life, to the resilience we discover in our darkest moments. This story isn't just about a man and a horse. It's about all of us, the ones who refuse to quit. If you feel the lessons in this journey, don't forget to hit subscribe on the Gallop of Glory channel, and join us as we continue to uncover stories that inspire and shape our lives.